So this is how to sow and grow sunflowers. Now lots of people grow sunflowers, they're really, really beautiful, and I think maybe a lot of people think of them as perhaps a really good way to produce bird food very cheaply. But what a lot of people don't realise is just how many ways you can eat sunflowers. So we've actually made a whole separate video talking about all the different ways you can make the most of sunflowers. So make sure you check that out as well as this. Now you've got two options when you're talking about sowing sunflowers. You can sow them directly where you want them to grow, and I find that they tend to be happiest when they grow that way. The problem is that mice and pigeons and other birds are really, really good at finding those seeds, digging them out of the soil and eating them. So you'll sow all these beautiful sunflower seeds and very few of them will pop up. So it's a good idea to sow some trays of sunflowers as well, just to make sure you're completely covered. Now sunflowers grow fairly fast, so you don't want to start them too early, otherwise they're going to get very, very long and thin and floppy before you get a chance to plant them out. You want to be starting them probably around April time, and then you plant them out after last frost. So take a module tray and fill it with compost and give it a good tap to make sure you've got rid of any air pockets that are in there. And then you take your sunflower seeds and you're going to sow them on their side. Seeds that are sown on their end are more likely to rot in the soil before they have a chance to germinate. So turn it on its side and then you're pushing it way down deep in the soil. You've got to sow sunflowers fairly deep, so we're talking about the second knuckle on your fingers. And you should get fairly good germination. So as a general rule, you're safe to sow one seed per module. Once you push the seed in the soil, just take a little bit more compost and sprinkle it on top to make sure they're nicely covered. And you shouldn't generally need any extra heat in order to get these to germinate. Outside in the greenhouse should be enough, but if it's unseasonably cold, you may want to think about bringing them indoors, possibly using a little bit of heat mat just to get them started. So once your little sunflowers start popping up and growing, they'll grow very quickly. Now the question is, to stake or not to stake? You may find you end up with a relatively tall flower that can be quite floppy long before it's time to plant them out in the garden. So do you stake them? Well, this is how you want to think about it. Tough love can go an awful long way with sunflowers. Basically, the more they are wobbled, the stronger their stems will grow. So out in nature, they would naturally encounter wind and breezes, and that will wobble them around all over the place. And that triggers them to start making more and more woody material in their stems, and therefore becoming naturally strong. So you'll tend to find that sunflowers that have germinated naturally outside don't tend to need staking. So we can simulate that with our indoor grown sunflowers by giving them a little shake. So when all your seedlings have popped up, every couple of days, brush your hand across the seedlings. Now this might seem like tough love, but what it will do is start triggering them to make those stems nice and strong, and that's what you want. Ideally, you don't want to be staking your sunflowers. You want them to do it by themselves. Because sunflowers do grow relatively fast, you may find if you have started them a little bit too early, they need to be potted on from the module tray. It's going to get a little bit too small for them. Whatever happens, just make sure that when the time comes to plant them out, you're waiting till after all risk of frost has passed. After that, they tend to be fairly good at taking care of themselves. Now you know when your sunflower heads are ready to harvest, because rather than looking up at the sun, they're going to start to turn down and look at the ground. And all those petals around the outside of the flower head, they're going to die back and crisp up and eventually drop off. And that's when the seeds are fully mature and the head is ready to pick. And it can be a little bit of a balancing act, because you want to make sure that the seeds are ripe and fully mature in there, but you also want to make sure you get to them before the birds and the squirrels get them. If you want to have a go at growing sunflowers, check out our range on shegrowsveg.com.